So, if you buy my argument that we should be able to use computational thinking to teach this wide variety of things, we need to ask the questions, well, what should we be teaching everybody about computing? I hear this argument from computer science teachers pretty often. Okay, if you teach CS in these other classes, can we possibly teach enough computer science? Well, let me offer an analogy. How much of a foreign language do you need to be able to communicate in this new country that you go to? Now, that's different, to be able to be a tourist, to be able to say, where's the bathroom and where's the bank and where's the train station? Now, that's different than how much of a foreign language you need to be fluent. And isn't it the case that you can always learn more about any language? Let me go back to an idea of literacy. We think that it's really important for people to know how to read and write. That's literacy. It's a foundation of modern society. Now, we need people who specialize in literacy. We need novelists and journalists and screenwriters. But the biggest impact of writing is the everyday use of it. The fact that you make grocery lists, the fact that you write notes to your loved ones. That's the really powerful notion of reading and writing. Mitchell Resnick talks about that the real value of Scratch is to think about how do you write a computational note to your grandmother. That's a really powerful idea. Now, this wonderful group at the University of Chicago, Katie Rich and her collaborators, have been asking the question in several papers, but the very first one, the one that really captured my attention, was published in ICER at 2017. What's the starting place for K through 8 CS learners? And so they looked at what is the trajectory of ideas that students need in K through 8 to be able to learn ideas like the sequence of programming statements and how repetition is valuable. Let me zoom in on the left-hand side of each of these. And let me propose to you that while Katie Rich and Diana Franklin and their collaborators were trying to think about what do we know from K through 8, from our empirical studies, from the research literature, what is it that students need to learn when they're learning programming in K through 8? I think they're identifying things that everybody needs to learn when they're first learning programming. So things like precision and completeness are important when writing instructions in advance. The idea that different sets of instructions can actually produce the exact same outcome. I'm going to guess that computer scientists looking at this will say, well, of course, if you don't understand this, you can't learn the rest of programming. But this is only the beginning. I mean, this is a critical first step. I'm going to suggest that actually these 5, this might be a superset. Consider Scratch. Scratch has, when I looked it up last, it was 30 million users, so it's certainly more than that. Scratch is this very powerful environment in which kids do drag and drop programming, lots and lots of users. Most Scratch projects are telling stories. And there's a lot of studies about what's actually going on in a Scratch project. One of my favorites is by Debbie Fields and Yasmin Kafai. And when they look at all of these Scratch projects, they find that almost all of them, if they use any loops at all, just use forever loops. They almost never use any Booleans. It's just movement and sequence. 30 million people are finding that Scratch is really expressive, even though they don't use very much of computer science. I mentioned earlier that I'm a big fan of Bootstrap Algebra. Bootstrap Algebra helps kids learn Algebra 1 by having them build video games in the Racket programming language. And they find in several studies that it actually improves students' learning in algebra. In Bootstrap Algebra, students do not code repetition. There's repetition. It's how you build a video game. There's got to be something repeating. But they don't code it. It's a functional programming environment, so the list of programming concepts isn't one-to-one with the things that the Rich et al. Paper was telling us about in ICER 2017. But if you look down that list in the middle of the programming concepts, there's not a whole lot there. And yet, we're finding that even in this subset of computer science, there is learning power, that students are learning about algebra using just this small subset of computer science.